I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that are indie developers that have done the development, but they usually have a publisher working with them and all that.
Yeah,
So
it's a task.
yeah, but I feel like then
It's
you
tricky.
you also learn more.
Exactly.
Like
You learn a lot more. Yeah.
if you ever move to another, like maybe to a company to work with a team, you'll have like, oh, be like, who can do this? Oh, I know how to do that because I've done that before.
Yeah. It's a lot of insight. It's a blessing and a curse, I'd say.
Mhm. And your name, Graham of Legend, did it come from Tim Schafer, Tim of Legend? Is he a
Yeah.
big inspiration to you?
It's a very funny story. So
Mhm.
essentially, when I used to work in motion graphics, I never ever thought I'd actually be in game development.
Mhm.
And you know, like when you first make your first like gamer tag or your first online handle, whatever, it's always something dumb
Yeah.
and like kind of childish. And so one day I just wanted to make a better name, and I followed Tim. I'm like, oh, I kind of like how Tim of Legend sounds. What if I did Graham of Legend? I'm never going to be in games
Yeah.
anyway. And then I was in games.
And have you met him since then, or not yet?
I've met him a couple of times actually. Yeah, yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Never gotten to actually talk to him, but yeah,
Mhm.
he's cool. Um, Thankfully his company is not called Team of Legend because then that'd be
Yeah.
weird. Yeah,
You were born in Jamaica. So what's your
Jamaica. Yep.
and then I know you went to SCAD in Savannah, and then you made your way to New
Mm-hmm.
York. But I guess what's your journey into game development from being a kid all the way to, or because you also studied graphic design more, right? And art,
I said motion graphics.
motion
Yeah.
graphics, and arts more. But then you kind
Yep.
of translated that to gaming
Yeah.
later on.
So essentially, just played a lot of games growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like games was like the one thing that I just knew I was always in love with, but I never ever thought you could make them just because, you know, it was always the bigger companies. And back then, I mean, I never thought about it at the time until later, like until maybe last year even. If you play like games on Newgrounds, there's all the Flash games that used to exist. Those are all just indie games, but you never really thought about it like
Yeah.
that. You just thought about them as, oh, they're just this online, some online game. I don't know who made them. They exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then at SCAD, I studied motion graphics, like I said, and one of my friends, also from Jamaica, he was in the game design program, and he said, "Yo, let's just do the global game jam." And then he realized, oh yeah, we can actually make games ourselves. It's not just limited to the big companies. Not you don't have to have like a 50-person, 100-person team to make games. So from there we made a game called Shapes and Sound, the Shapeshooter for
Mm-hmm.
Android. And then after that, I was like, oh, I kind of want to learn Unity now because it just seems accessible. I did like a bit of programming in high school, but that was the only programming I've ever done. And thankfully, YouTube is like the king of knowledge.
Yeah.
So I just went and just looked up how to make a Pong game, how to make Pong essentially, and
Mhm.
learned from that. Then just kept learning from there.
Mhm.
Um, and I was just kind of doing it as a hobby kind of thing. Or I
Mhm.
shouldn't say a hobby because I was actually releasing stuff, but I was doing it as a side hustle, I should say. And then in 2021, I left my full time, and this is now my full time, Grandma
Yeah.
Legend.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like going from Jamaica to Savannah?
Um, for me, so I have close family that lives in Florida. And
Okay.
so I used to come up here every year. So it didn't feel like a big switch to me. Like Georgia and Florida don't feel too different.
Yeah.
At least Savannah and like Florida don't feel too
I
different.
like Savannah a lot. Savannah's a
It's
beautiful
nice.
place.
It's beautiful. And it's very chill.
Hmm.
Um, and it's also very hot in the summer, which is Jamaica's always hot. So
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't too hard of a transition for me. It was quote unquote cold, but I
Yeah, it gets
mean
colder
that's
than here
it gets
in
cold in
Miami.
Jamaica, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that was adjustment to me. Like when it was 60, I was shivering.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, now I'm in New York and it gets, you know, like up here it can sometimes get below zero. So that was more of an adjustment for me. But yeah, from Jamaica to Savannah, it was chill. Thankfully I had friends also coming from Jamaica
Hmm.
that went to SCAD as well. And there's a bunch of other Caribbean people. So I never really felt like I was out of place.
That's
I just
good.
spent most of my time with Caribbean and international people.
Hmm. And did you ever? I was there for a wedding a while ago, and I went to this bar called Abe's on Lincoln. Did you ever go there? They
Apes on
had, yeah,
Lincoln.
because they had all these
I don't
people
think
would
so, no.
draw Abraham Lincoln on napkins and they put it all over the walls.
Oh my
We just
gosh,
ended up
no, I
there after my
never.
friend's wedding. That
Oh, that's
was funny.
funny. No, I didn't. I'm really very interested to figure out what actually exists since I left.
What
And
still
especially
is?
since the pandemic, because the pandemic I'm sure wiped out a lot of places. But
Yeah,
even since I left, I'm not sure what still is there that was popular back then.
yeah. Well, I went
Back then.
to
I graduated in 2012, so
oh
it's
no, I
not that long ago,
graduated
but
in
also that was like 10 years, 11 years ago,
yeah, I graduated 2009. I left Tallahassee because I went to Florida State, but even
Oh, nice.
I went a few years later, and I was like, wow, this is different. Like all the
Different,
places I
right?
used to
Yeah.
eat are gone.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
For Super Space Club, I guess how would you describe the game to someone who hasn't seen anything about it? Or
Just just dope space game. It's essentially I was heavily inspired by asteroids, but not just playing asteroid, but more so specifically the way an asteroid is controlled. It's very physics based. It's very you point in one way, you fly that way, you shoot that way. Everything is just that way, right?
Mhm.
And it feels like you're in space, like you're floating around, and I
Yeah.
love that. I have a big love for like Geometry Wars and like the pixel junk shooter, those
Mhm.
games. There's any kind of twin stick, but I didn't want this to feel like a twin stick shooter. I want it to feel like intentional. And so between that and then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that was a big influence. Just
Yeah.
the visual is a very colorful movie. And so I want to make mine feel very colorful and stylized. And so yeah, Super Space Club is just asteroids meets Star Fox meets just a blast of color and just vibes. Because the soundtrack is also a big part of the game, which
Mhm.
is it's like a lo-fi hip hop reggae infusion kind of beats with vocals, with lyrics from a friend from college, this black artist named Art Class Hero, a friend from Jamaica. His name is Rizik, is a dope reggae artist. It's like I have a French woman, her name is Ore. I
Mhm.
don't, I probably doesn't not pronouncing it properly because I can't speak
Mhm.
French, but there's people from all over and it's pretty dope.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just chill. Like when you actually play it, it's difficult, but you never feel like frantic like and if you're playing any of those like bullet hell games
Mhm.
because the vibe is completely different. I was also inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy, the very first one,
Mhm.
when you saw Peter Quill. Have you seen it?
Yeah. We
So
just
in yeah, so
rewatched them too because we I saw the
oh,
third
before
one,
to
so I
watch
rewatched them
three,
again.
three's out now. Yeah, I need to go see it.
Mhm.
But in the first one, for those of you who haven't watched, there's a scene where Peter Quill, the main character, he's exploring some place and he's like shooting and killing people.
Yeah.
But he's listening to like his Zune, which is like a
Mhm.
iPod. And it's all this very chill 80s, 70s, 80s music. And the vibe is just so
Yeah.
not typically, yeah,
The
typically you hear like
opposite
action
kind
and
of.
movie. Yeah, the opposite is very hectic and action based and supposed to get your blood pumping, but he's just here chilling, vibing, just doing the thing. And that's what I wanted in Super Space Club to feel like.
Mhm.
It is a bullet hell shooter, but doesn't feel like one.
Yeah. I played the
Yeah.
demo a lot and I feel like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this looks like a lot of these games that I like that I played before. But when I played it, it felt different, maybe because of the visuals, the music, but
Mhm.
also the way it feels and plays. Because you're like boosting the ship and trying to move it instead of doing the twin stick thing.
Right.
But there's like a lot of cool stuff there that makes it feel different. But it is, and it gets hectic. But I feel like you start to learn a bit as you play, also, which is cool,
Yeah.
and get better at it.
Exactly. Like I'm also so many inspirations. Like it's funny how we are as humans, we're inspired by so many things, both
Mm-hmm.
directly and indirectly. Like I also love the Housemarque games because they're just excellent at making arcade games. And just something about the way that they develop their games. It always has a feel of it's easy to pick up but hard to master. But
Yeah.
once you master it, just keep going and going. There's always so much room to grow and get better at it. And so I always feel like I wanted to make something that you could just pick up and play, but then it has some level of depth to it just from you learning to play.
Mm-hmm. And Housemark, they made Returnal, and but before that, they did was it Resogun or
They did Resogun that was on PS4. They did Super Stardust HD, which was on PS3. And I was looking it up the other day. The original Stardust was like in the 90s.
oh
They've
wow.
been around for a long time. Yeah. My introduction to them was the PS3, but apparently they were just around forever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when it comes to your first games, Shapes and Sounds and Hectic Cube that were mobile games,
Mhm.
you made those with friends, right? Or with other people?
So Shapes and Sound was with two friends from Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
and Hexkey was my first solo thing.
Was
That
just your
was when
first solo?
I made Pong, and
Yeah,
then
to learn.
I made a World Cup themed Pong, which was
Oh.
fun. But then the World Cup ended, and so I was like, oh, I need to make this into my own thing now because why not? And so somehow that just took a different shape. It like took a life of its own and became Hectic Cube.
hmm And I
Yeah.
get, how did those games influence the new Super Space Club?
How
Or
did
just
those influence Super Space Club? I mean, I guess just the art style and
Mhm,
like because those are very minimal games, and so Super Space Club I figured just let me make this minimal too, because if you go on Steam and just look up any top-down space shooter, I
mhm,
feel like it's hard to tell them apart. They all just look the same. It's like some generic looking ship, usually 2D, very dark and gloomy, or dark and like, like it looks like space, like just regular space. And
mhm,
even if it has like nebulas in the background, it still feels dark. It feels like you're in space, like typical space. And so if you look at Hectocube, it's a very colorful game. And so I wanted to translate that style over to Super Space Club 2 and make it just vibrant and colorful and stand out amongst every other space game.
mhm. Um, oh, I
Which is
played.
funny because like, sorry, I was gonna say with
Oh,
Shapes and Sound, it's all black and white.
mhm,
But I feel like that's also stood out just because even though it was black and white, it was very design based. Like I take a lot of influence from just my motion graphics background and I like to have a lot of design elements in my games.
mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, no, when I played the demo for Super Space Club, I only played, I think, as I don't know if there were other there was only one character available, or were there more? I played as one, I think,
I
and
feel
one
like the demo
ship.
it should have two of
There
each,
might
two
have been
weapons,
two and
two
two
ships, two
and two
characters.
characters.
Yeah,
But
like
how do
most of my
the
game. Two
how do
characters,
the
yeah.
characters I guess how do the characters change the gameplay, or is that more aesthetic? And then I guess the ships probably have different weights and stuff to them,
Yeah,
or
so
they
all the things you can pick are different elements.
everything
So
changes things.
yeah. So the weapons obviously self-explanatory, different weapons fire differently. And each weapon, so one big thing about the game is that there's an energy system. So when you shoot and you take damage, you lose energy.
Yeah.
It's not just, I mean, I'm just telling for the people listening.
Hmm.
It's not just you take damage and that's it. So you can die just by shooting and then the last hit you take will kill you, you know? And so different weapons, it's not just about having a different feel, but they consume more or less energy. And then the ships, they have different weights, like you said,
Hmm.
but also they just feel completely different. Like some of them are heavier and slower. Some of them they have like pinpoint accuracy when you're turning. Some of them are really floaty. It just depends
Hmm.
on what you want to, like how you prefer to travel through space. And the characters, they all have different abilities. So I mean, and also they just look cool, I think. I never designed this, so it's mostly by me, but the music
Yeah.
and the sound design are from Fatbar, and they kill it, they're sick.
Hmm.
And obviously all the collaborators, and then the characters. I had a friend, he did the concept art, and then another guy who did actually render them for the game. And of course, the characters and the music are my favorite parts of the game, the parts I didn't do.
Well, yeah,
So yeah, the
because
characters just add a lot of personality to the game, but also, like I said, they have different abilities, and that changes how you play as well. You can be more defensive, you can be more offensive, or just anything in between.
and when you went to people like the outside people to help you with character design and stuff, did you have a story in your head, or just like I need some cool characters, what just do what you want kind of thing?
Pretty much, cool characters do what
Yeah.
you want. Well, almost. It was more collaborative when I went to. So Steven is a concept artist, and so when
Hmm.
I went to him, I knew I wanted it to be anthropomorphic characters,
Hmm.
and I also knew that I wanted the abilities to be grounded like to the characteristics of the animals themselves.
Hmm.
So we both brainstormed a list of animals, and I thought of what I could actually make the abilities be. And then from there, we're like, all right, cool, let's pick these animals. So for example, there's a pangolin knight, that's the character you start with. And pangolins have a very tough exterior. And so like, oh, simple, let's give him a shield. His ability is a shield because he pangolins, they can roll up into like a little ball and like just protect themselves. Um, and then there is it's another good example. Um, the most interesting one I think was there's a chameleon named Roscoe.
Hmm.
And obviously a chameleon, you think, oh, they can just go invisible, or they can like camouflage themselves rather. But I couldn't figure out how to make that fun. Because
Hmm.
it just be, oh, you go invisible and then what? The enemies miss, or they just kind of shoot all over the place. Like, I didn't know how to make
Yeah.
that cool. And as I was looking it up, what I realized was, like chameleons, they can look all over. They have their eyes, they can individually look where they want to
Yeah.
look. But then when you see them do the tongue thing and like catch their prey, they use both eyes and focus on
That's
one
probably.
thing. And it's almost like it's like they slow down time almost because they're so focused, it's hyper
Hmm.
focused. And so Roscoe, what he does is when he uses his ability, he essentially goes a lot faster. Like he speeds up or slows down time, whichever way you want to interpret it.
Hmm.
And did you watch the Cyberpunk anime?
No, I haven't watched it. I saw
Oh,
that came
it's
out.
really good. You should watch it.
Hmm.
But essentially there's this or if you played the game too, they have
Yeah,
a
I played some of the game. I
oh,
need to get
okay.
back into it.
It's really I'm playing that right now. It's very good. They have a body modification called the stand up stand. And essentially just it slows down time or
Hmm.
you again the speed up, whichever way you want to interpret it. But the visual effect that they did was almost like an echoing effect.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, this looks sick. I'm going to borrow this and put this into a Source Cloud. But before I just had like a slow motion and it had an echo, but now it's a very colorful, like it just looks very cool and also makes you feel very cool. Like the whole, like I said, the whole themes of the game are like vibe, just being cool,
Yeah.
just enjoying yourself flying around in space. That's really what I want people to get out of it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and so all the characters, they just their abilities are influenced by the character themselves. And the characters, I would have thought of what cool animals you could make. That was
Hmm.
it.
That's cool. And the game's coming to Xbox and PC first. Is it like a Game Pass game, or is it just
No,
more
no, no, no,
about,
no Game Pass yet.
no?
No Game Pass yet.
Is it part of, is it like just let's get on one console and then worry about optimizing it for other ones if we do that, or
It's kind of. So initially, it was only going to be on Steam, and then I
Mhm.
got in touch with some people at ID at Xbox,
Okay.
and they're like really, really, really helpful. And so they were like, "Oh, hey, let's help you get it onto the platform." And so that's why it ended up going to be launching on Xbox and Steam. So I'm like
Hmm.
same ship on both. It's as you mentioned, like very early on in the us talking. Publishing your own game is very hard.
Yeah.
And so there was, especially because it's my first time making, actually it's my first time making both a PC game and a console game, because before I owned in mobile.
Yeah.
And so making it for PC itself, it's not too terrible. I think it's actually easier than making for mobile.
Hmm.
But then console is like a whole different beast. Like you have to go
Yeah.
through porting issues. You have to even once you don't have the once you have the port done, you have to go through certification. You can fail certification as many times as you put it
Same.
through, like the whole thing. Whereas on PC, if I wanted, I could press ship right now and it
And
would just
just put it
go. It'd be out by next week.
there. Hmm.
Um, and so me doing that for each of the consoles, each one has their own certification process. It's not just one certification, then you can ship it wherever, which
Yeah.
is that's like a whole thing that some people I don't think they realize.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I'm just trying to do the Xbox first, and then I'm going to see if there's demand for other platforms. Probably Switch, because Switch just seems like
Yeah.
it
Switch
feels
just seems like a
I
cool
have a Steam
place.
Deck and it makes sense, right? Switch is
Hmm.
like Switch and Steam Deck are like the indie machines, and so it
Yeah.
just makes sense to just have it on a handheld device.
Hmm.
So we'll see post launch what one happens.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess I didn't start thinking about the whole porting process until a few years ago when I noticed like, oh, there's like this company made the game, but they're going to a different company to port it later on because they don't want to deal with it because it's probably
Exactly.
a headache and these people know what to do because they've done it before.
Yeah, so that's
It's like a,
also right. That's another option. I could just go to a porting house,
mhm,
but they're not cheap.
no.
Not cheap. So it's also a thing you have to, if for example I had like a million wish lists, right? Then I was like, oh, okay, cool. This game is going to do very well.
Hmm.
I can afford to pay for a porting host to help me port to other places because I know I make like the money. But when sometimes you just don't know, and you don't want to put all this money into the
Yeah.
game and you're not really sure it's going to make it back. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think the game will do fine, but I'm not sure it's worth, not right now. I'm not sure if it's worth me putting it out on everything just to
Hmm.
see. Yeah.
No. And when games come out again, it gives them like a new life because then even if it's already on
Exactly.
PC and
Yeah.
Xbox and someone missed it, their friend might be like, "Oh, have you tried this game on Switch?" And then they check like, "Oh, it's on my thing too," and then they pick it up now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know you've been featured in a lot of stuff, which is great. Like you're in the Black Voices and gaming and a few
Mm-hmm.
events and like conferences. So that was cool to see.
Yeah. Those are always fun to do. I need to
Mm-hmm.
have a new game now because all those things have been Super Space Clubs. I need to
Yeah.
ship this and have a new thing to show everybody, you
Hmm.
know. This year.
Yeah. And then that's what's some of the troubles it's been like working as a team of one. I know now you've had the idea at Xbox people to help you, and you probably have like friends around that you can ask questions that have done stuff before.
Mhm.
But what are some hard stuff that has come up that you had to figure out on your own, maybe?
So for me, the hardest thing is just time
Hmm.
because like when I have worked with other people, not even just in game job, but just in general. When I worked at my day job, I used to work at Snapchat. When I worked
Hmm.
there, obviously it's a big company. I'm just one person doing one thing that advances the whole app, or just other games I've worked on. It's very cool to do some work and then end for the day, go to sleep, wake up, and oh look, this person has added changes here, someone has
Yeah.
added changes there. There's a new song to listen to. But when it's just me, I mean, working with Fat Bird, it was always sick to wake up and hear new music or hear new sound effects and see that in the game.
Hmm.
But other than that, if I'm not working on the game, it's not being worked on. There's no one else to work on it.
Yeah.
And having a full-time job that was hard because some days obviously the day job would require more of me.
Hmm.
Sometimes it was lighter, so I'd actually get to do more. But once I was like really swamped with work, I just couldn't work on the game. And so that was very hard. And then now I have two kids. I have
Oh
a
yeah.
how old is he? He's almost my son is almost 3,
Okay.
and my daughter is 2 months, I
A few
believe
months.
now. 2 months, and like time goes so fast. She's relatively new.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so juggling family plus trying to make a game by yourself is a big challenge. Like you have to be really good at just time management and not even just that. Like I could plan my day perfectly, but even still, they're
Yeah.
children,
Things
Like
just come in the way.
anything, yeah, things come up, and so it's about having good time management, but also being good at being adaptive, essentially.
Hmm.
And that's been probably my biggest struggle. Um, yeah, I mean, otherwise, I love it. It's fun. I enjoy working with people, but I also just enjoy working on my own thing too. But
Yeah.
then it's like I'm good at working with limitations, I guess. And that's like obviously if I was trying to make like a big open world game, I can't do that by myself. Some people could, I'm sure, but
Hmm.
I personally can't. And I know it's
Hmm.
about myself. And so I haven't really found any personal hardships outside of the time thing, working on things by myself because the internet's there to help me if I need. I can just ask friends who've made other games. It's not really hard to figure out how to do something, I
Hmm.
think. It's just time.
Yeah. Well, I have the
Yeah.
same problem that I always have so many things I want to do because now I'm doing like the website.
Yeah.
I started doing more photography. So then there's editing of
Oh,
pictures
nice.
and stuff. Just so many things. And I'm like, and sometimes I plan like, okay, today I'm
I
gonna do
understand.
my work stuff, then this and this, take a break and do this, and then like the internet
Mm,
goes down or something happens, and then I have to spend time on that, and I lose all that time.
right,
It's
right.
just too many
I mean,
things.
there's also that like too many things. Like I also have a YouTube channel which I've been trying to run. Um, and just there's also things I just want to do on the side. Like I want to play more games. I want to
Yeah.
like just make more art because I love just like illustrating stuff in general.
Hmm.
It's just so much to do, it's so little time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I should have taken more advantage of the time, like in college when I just had a few classes a day and so much free time.
Exactly. It's always hindsight's 2020, right? Like
Yeah.
you only look back and you're like, oh wow, I had a lot of time. What did I do with
Hmm.
it?
And then in
There's
the
always more you could have done.
yeah.
That's why you just have to figure out the right things to do somehow so
Hmm.
that you don't look back and wish you did something else, you know?
Yeah. And then in the future, would you want to continue solo on your next project? Maybe start
Mm.
put together a small team, or would you want to go to a AAA kind of big game at some point and try that? Even?
I think it all of the above,
They
most
all
of the
sound
above.
good.
Like I definitely do want to make more games by myself.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't really thought of working with other people on my own thing.
Hmm.
But I do want to cut, like I have contributed to other games. I have a friend who, his game called Proto Delta. This guy named Adam Kareem. His game is coming out May 23rd, I think. And I worked on a lot of the UX UI for that game. And so I love collaborating with people too. Like I want to do more of that, but I don't necessarily want to do like an equal partnership kind of thing right now. It's either I want to fully own it or I want to work for someone else who
and help
fully
them
owns it,
out.
like, and help them out. Exactly. Like I just feel
Mhm.
like it's that's an easier process to deal with.
Yeah.
And then I would work for like a AAA or even a bigger indie studio.
Mhm.
It just depends on the right opportunity. And also somewhere that wouldn't require me to leave New York because I don't have any intention of leaving New York
Oh,
right
yeah.
now. Yeah. Yeah, that's very hard because a lot of good places are like in LA or Seattle or like West Coast.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mostly talk to people that are either on their own or small teams, but I've never really been able to talk to any AAA people. Kind of just, I want to learn that about that. Like, what's it like to go in, you do this one little thing, or you're working on like this small part of a game,
Yeah.
and then you
I can
leave.
imagine I feel like working at Snapchat, it probably feels a lot similar to that.
Hmm.
But also there's very game specific things that I'm sure I have no idea about, Because
Yeah.
that's just one app. And of course release different update. We release different updates and whatnot. But when you're at like a big AAA game studio, releasing different games and you're working on different things that come out over years, decades.
Hmm. So starting off, what was your early gaming history and memories, like your first consoles or PCs
Oh,
growing
Super
up, or
Nintendo.
first games?
Yeah. My first console was Super Nintendo. I was like, I think 4, and I got I remember my dad walking in with this on my birthday with Super Nintendo box and Super Metroid. and we couldn't pass the first level. Because I mean, at that point, I don't think he had ever played games before, at least not with a controller.
Mhm.
And I was forced, obviously I didn't play anything.
Yeah.
And so us just trying to learn how to do platforming was very hard. And so my cousin traded me. He took Metroid and gave me Mario All Stars, which was dope. That's like a much easier platform. Like Mario is
Yeah.
much easier to get into, especially for a 4-year-old.
Hmm.
And then I remember also he had a like an old like DOS prompt computer, like a old Windows 95, or even before Windows 95, I guess. And so I remember playing like Jazz Jackrabbit and it's a bunch of like floppy disk games, which is dope.
Hmm.
Um the floppy disk, for those of you who don't know, is like this is a save button. This is a like
Yeah.
it feels like so long ago, right?
Yeah.
But yes, I started there and then I played lots of like Game Boy, like a lot of handheld stuff. So Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Advance, SP, like all that stuff. Um Yeah, that's where I started. It's heavy Nintendo and
Hmm.
PC. Lots of Sims, like all that stuff.
And then what was the Jamaican gaming scene like? Were there mostly playing at home or going to friends' houses and playing together, or was there like an arcade or something to meet up at?
Um, I feel like most is going to friends' houses, and it's similar
Hmm.
to here, I'd assume. Arcades aside, just playing games. We could rent games and play them.
Hmm.
Um, I remember going to LAN parties for both playing Halo. I mean, I
Hmm.
never really, I didn't like Halo like that, but I had friends who would have LAN parties, put the two big box TVs side
Yeah.
by side and play Halo. And then a little later on, like in my teen years, I'd play Dota with friends and we'd have big LAN parties and just play Dota.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's pretty similar to America, I'd say. Just
Yeah.
playing with friends, playing at home, eventually playing online.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had growing up, we had like on my street because I live in a small island here in Miami. Where I grew up here on my street,
An
I had like
island in Miami? What do you
yeah,
mean?
and it's
You
Key
have
Biscayne.
islands?
It's like a small island part of Miami. It's connected, but it's
Ah,
like a little community thing.
gotcha. Nice.
But on my street, it was like there was four of us that were good friends, so we'd play outside all morning, and then like go to someone's house, play Nintendo or Super Nintendo, then go outside, play
Yeah.
more.
Actually, like, yeah, as you mentioned it, I remember early days growing up playing Super Nintendo, and my neighbor had a Genesis. And I remember us playing like Mortal Kombat 3, I think. And it was funny because this is so old school. Of course, there was no internet, no game facts, none of that stuff. And so he had a book written and he wrote down all the move
Oh
lists and
well.
everything. Because MK never had a move list at that time.
Hmm.
And so he wrote down move lists of fatalities, but then they wouldn't tell me because I was like the youngest. And so I remember watching them play and watching the characters move forward and back. And I learned the moves just from watching them and kind of figuring out what buttons to press.
Hmm.
But, there's a lot of us going over, passing the controller around and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Good times.
Hmm.
Simpler times.
Yeah. Oh. I guess what are your interests outside of gaming, other than art and I guess you like music too? You play the piano or the keyboard?
Uh, I've always been interested in learning the keyboard, but that's strictly like a hobby. Like if I had more time, I would probably take class and just learn how to play just for fun. Like I have no interest in doing that any kind of professionally, even making music
Hmm.
for my games. Like I don't really have any interest in doing that. It's just I just enjoy playing it. Um, and then yeah, like you said, art. Like I love just making art, playing games. I guess those are really my main interests. Since
Hmm.
I've moved up to the suburbs, I've gotten into woodworking, but it's not cheap.
Oh, that's cool.
So like if I had more money, I'd do a lot more of that too. And that's
Hmm.
it's really like I love working with my hands. Like it's one everything's on the screen, like I enjoy being able to just actually make something from scratch
Yeah.
essentially with my hands, which is dope. And then it's my family, my kids, of course, my wife, just
Hmm.
enjoying time with them, watching movies. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend that's into woodworking and he helped me build like a dice rolling box
Ooh.
for board games because we're all into board games, like our group.
Nice. I'd say I wish I was into board games. Like I would be. I just don't. I feel like I never had that big group of people who are into
Yeah,
board
you
games.
have
It's
to
always
have
video
like
games for me.
yeah, because I started off having like some friends that were into board games and we play a game at their house. I'd be like, oh, I want to buy this, but then I'm like, oh, why did I buy this? like I play with them, they already have it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then I
Yeah.
stopped being crazy with buying board games, and then now I have a friend that has like thousands of games probably in his house, and he's trying to play
Oh,
through a bunch to see what to keep and what to get rid of. So we're trying to get
that's
together
funny.
every few weekends and play like a few
That's cool.
games. Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
been fun. It's fun when you have a group, but when you don't and you're just trying to find people, it's hard.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so that's why I never really got into board games. But
Mhm.
I know I would have loved it. I just never had the group to play. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. Video games are also dope.
Hmm.
Clearly, we're talking about them
Well,
right
because now
now.
we have online, so it's kind of like this the community kind of aspect of a board game
Right.
playing online. But
Yeah, but something about board games are
yeah.
just it's like it activates your imagination a lot more, you know?
Hmm.
Like
No, but
D&D, I never really knew about D&D. It just always seemed like this nerdy thing that
yeah.
the way it's portrayed on TV is like some really awkward kids in a basement.
Yeah.
But it's actually really sick. I never knew about that until I guess I watched Critical Role and I looked into it more.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, D&D is actually pretty dope. I wish I had that growing up. Or even just now. I'd play now. But and
No,
then I
that's
realized,
fun.
oh, that's just what Western RPGs are. It's just D&D.
Yeah, I started to learn that too because I do
Yeah.
improv here. So even I had some people in our theater that do D&D. So I was like, I want to try it, and it was fun with them because we're all trying to like we're more interested in our characters and trying to like work on the character.
So yeah, exactly. Like that part of it to me is just so fascinating.
Yeah.
Like your characters are you're not limited by a game design or anything. You're just limited by your imagination.
Hmm.
And I guess whatever the what's it called? The GM says you can or can't do. Like,
Yeah.
but I mean you can do a lot more. And I think that's very fun. You can just basically just make whatever kind of character you want.
Hmm. Yeah, and you can make whatever decision, even if you think like, oh, I can just ruin everyone's day by doing this right now, and like,
It's like, oh, sure, why not? Let's see how this plays out. Yeah,
what
I
are
think
your
it's really cool.
yeah? What are your favorite games to play? I guess like for fun, but also sometimes maybe when you're working on your game, like you need a break. Maybe there's a different type of game you play just to like take a break.
Um, sorry, give me one sec.
Hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that? You said what are my
Oh,
favorite games to
yeah.
play when I'm
I guess
taking a
your
break?
favorite types of games to play for fun, but
Mm,
also maybe when you're working a lot on your game and you need a break, maybe there's a game that like a mindless game you might play to just unwind or relax.
gotcha. Um, these days I don't think I have an answer for that.
Hmm.
For like 2015 to 2020, it was Rocket League.
Yeah, I
Like
play
I used
that
to
a
play that
lot.
game every single day. Rinsed it. It's such a good game. I I don't know why I stopped, but I used to adore that game. It's so good. I think I probably stopped because I hit my personal cap, my personal
Hmm.
ceiling, and just kind of stopped.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I
Um,
play it on online a lot, like on my
I still play.
PlayStation. Yeah, that's one of her favorites. Because during the pandemic, I got her
Such a good
into
game.
games that were like simple,
Yeah.
but now she's played more complicated games because of that.
I wouldn't even call that simple. Like it's sure you can drive and hit the ball, but once you
Yeah,
start
but
to
that
fly,
drop.
that's it. It's a whole
Yeah.
new game. I have a group of friends in Jamaica. We'd all play. Do you know Paladins? It's like Overwatch, but
Yeah,
not.
I tried it a little, I think.
Yeah. Somehow we
Hmm.
got into that, and ultimately preferred it over Overwatch
Hmm.
somehow. It just felt like a better game to me. Overwatch is more polished, obviously. Like it's you can't deny the Blizzard polish.
Yeah.
But these days I've just been just playing all the indies really. Just like picking up whatever I feel to pick up at the time because the big AAA games are just so hard to get into and finish. And I haven't finished a game since what's the last game I finished? I don't even know. Like maybe Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like,
I finished Breath of the Wild finally like last week, like 20 minutes before the new one released.
wow, wow.
Because I took a
Oh no, it's
long
not
break.
true. The last game I finished was I platinumed Spider-Man. That's what
Oh,
it
I
was.
platinum those, but I usually don't go
And that
for
was when it came
platinums.
out.
Hmm.
So I mean, usually I don't either. Like I go for it if it's attainable or if I just love the game. And for that, it
Yeah.
was both. It was like swinging, especially because I live here. It's like, oh, this they did a really good job of
Yeah.
making it feel like New York.
And I went to
Um,
my old street and I took a picture and I was like, look, and sent to my roommate, like, this is where we used to live.
nice. Like I remember there's one mission where I forget the actual context, but they were showing you different pictures and you have to go to different areas.
Hmm.
And before they even when they showed me the picture, I'm like, oh, that's Harlem. I was gonna start swinging there.
Yeah.
And then the guy would talk and he's like, oh yeah, I think that's up in Harlem. I'm like, yep, they
Yeah.
did a good job. Um, But yeah, there's just not enough time for me anymore to fully invest like 100, 200 hours into these games.
Mhm.
Like I played Red Dead 2, one of my favorite games. I'm only 30% into the game
Yeah, I
because
did a little
like
bit of that.
it's so deep.
Hmm.
So I'm playing through Cyberpunk now and I'm actually trying to beat that just because I really enjoy it. Played The Witcher. Like I used to love games like that, but it's just time, you know.
Yeah, I'm working on Star Wars Jedi Survivor now, and then I got
I
Tears of
started
the
the first
Kingdom.
one, couldn't finish it either.
Oh, I beat well that one. I played again. I just tried to do the main story right before this one, and now I'm
Yeah,
trying to beat that before I start Tears of the Kingdom because now it's going to be two like huge games while they're. I'm also trying to like review and wite about other smaller games. So I'm like one big
exactly.
game at a time, and
It's
then like do these things on the side.
right. What are you looking forward to this year?
This year,
Mm-hmm. Outside of Tears, obviously.
yeah. I don't know what else is coming next that I'm excited for. I think it's just Tears of the Kingdom came out, and then I forgot about everything else that's coming.
Gotcha. I feel like I have this year specifically, I have a list of just big games I want to play.
Hmm.
And then I'm trying to fit everything else into my life around that.
Yeah,
Like
well, because
Tears, I haven't started that yet because I know that once I start, that's a whole 200 hours and I'm going to beat like a Zelda games are the few games I always do beat.
hmm.
Um, but I can't start that because once I start, I'm not going to, my game won't come out. Like that's why I just won't finish it, you know? So I'm trying to get as far through the porting process and everything as I can
Yeah,
through Super Space Club and then
that
jump into Tears.
can be your reward for your
Exactly,
gift
yeah.
to
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. That's the plan.
Hmm.
And then Starfield later in the years, I'm looking
Oh
forward to
yeah,
that
Starfield.
too. And then Armored Core just came out of nowhere, and I used to love that on PS2 days. So that's like one of those early childhood
Yeah.
memories of me and my friend going to like rent the games. I used to rent that game all the time.
Hmm.
So that's coming out in August, I think. So I want to try that too.
Yeah, I've never
But
played
otherwise,
any of
that's it for
those,
me this
but
year.
it
Oh,
looks really
they're
cool.
so good. Yeah, those were what essentially made From Software popular before Dark Souls and Demon Souls came out.
Hmm. I still
So
have to go
good.
back and play Elden Ring that I started, but I think like
I
I'm
missed
just
that all
terrible
of
at
last
it.
year. Just
I
missed
have
it.
to try it again one day. But I have a lot of backlog. Like I have Cyberpunk that I started
Same
when they were having all the
backlog.
problems, so I was like, let me start again later. I never did. Like
Yeah,
her,
once the PS5 version came out, that's when I actually got into it,
yeah.
and it's such a good game. Like CD Projekt, they're probably one of my favorite AAA devs now, just because Witcher is one of my favorite
I
games,
love
and
Witcher
now
3.
Cyberpunk.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so
And then I
good.
have Horizon, the second one that I keep downloading it to my PlayStation when I have to delete it for to make room for stuff, but I haven't started it yet. But I'm like, I keep it there, like this is the next game, and then I delete
Yeah,
it because I'm like,
yeah.
no, now I have to play this
I
game.
want to. So with Horizon for me, it was really sad because I got that and Zelda at the same time. But I played Zelda
Oh
first,
yeah.
and then playing Horizon after, I'm like, I don't want to play this. Like, it's you can't climb. It's so like it
Yeah.
felt so old in comparison. You know, like Zelda just opened up so much that everything else is paled in comparison to me.
Yeah.
And so I never got into Horizon, which is sad because it's a really good game.
Hmm. No, I think I had Zelda and then I borrowed Horizon from a friend because he quit on it halfway through.
Yeah.
Because we used when he lived here, we used to just switch games. Like we'd each buy different ones that we were more
I miss that about
big
games too. Like
into.
I love by getting everything digital, but I miss
Yeah.
having physical things just passing them around.
Hmm. No,
Good
and now I have my
times.
nephews, so for anything Switch, I'm like, well, I should buy it the physical so I can give it to my nephew
Physical, that
later
makes
so he could get.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. I guess once my kids are old enough, if physical games are still a thing by that point,
Yeah.
I'll start doing that so we can just pass them around.
Hmm. And I guess I was thinking like what are other than art and movies and like how you said the Guardians of the Galaxy thing inspired stuff for the game. I guess what are other things you might do to like creative fuel consumption type of things that you might get ideas from, or maybe you're taking a break and then you're like, oh, this would be really cool for my game or for something I'm working on, even if it's just art.
I mean, honestly, most of my inspiration, I feel like I'm a very visual person, both
Hmm.
in terms of the way I consume things and how I get inspiration, and then also how I make. Like I'm the kind of person, the kind of developer who wants to make something that looks gorgeous first and then focus on the gameplay. The gameplay has to be good, obviously, but like there's a lot of games I feel like they're extremely like 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 games, but they look not even bad. This don't look like anything special.
Hmm.
When you play, that's when the magic comes, right? But for me, I've because I love just visuals in general so much, that's just a big part for me. And that's also just how I get my ideas. So I'll just be on Pinterest or just on Instagram or whatever and see something that's completely unrelated to games, so a dope piece of art.
Hmm.
And I think, oh, how would that be a game? That's just how my mind works. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Like, how
cool.
could that make a good game? Or how can I take elements of this and make it into a game? Um, and so yeah, I have so many ideas just based on that, or even just from real life, like living in New York, just on the subway or just walking and looking at all the buildings and seeing people in their different apartments doing random stuff.
Hmm.
Those all just inspire me to make different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I miss riding the subway to work and like having time to
Same.
read or think or do stuff.
Yeah, I don't miss going to a job, but I
Yeah.
miss the actual going part, like
Yeah, like having time to, because now I drive and I'll listen to music or podcasts and stuff like that. But
it's limiting. It's like you still have to
mhm,
focus on driving, whereas on the subway,
yeah,
you just get on, your body mentally just knows how long it feels to like 45 minutes for your commute. You just
yeah,
know. And I played most of Breath of the Wild on the train. Like,
yeah. I didn't even have a Switch yet, but that would have been great back then.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then what's next for Graham of Legend? Do you have ideas for your next project or?
definitely. I have several ideas. So I think this game, Super Space Club, it took me, rather, I should say I started working on it like 2019, like early 2019.
Mhm.
But the idea has been bouncing around in my head. It used to be a mobile concept I had back from like 2014. And so somehow I was wanting to make a space game essentially. Um, but it hasn't been consistent, like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week work. And so I
Yeah.
think at this point it's been 7, 8 months of work. Like if I just counted up my hours, 'cause I do track my hours.
Mhm.
But because it has been since 2019, I really want my next game, I want to be something that's quick and just like I can make it in a year, more or less. Make it and release it in a year or less.
Mhm.
But I have so many ideas. I have ideas for bigger games that would take us longer. I have ideas for just really small, fun experiences, are more arcade stuff. It's just a matter of the business side of it, of what should I make next that can actually sustain me and keep me afloat.
Yeah. And I guess, do you store the ideas more as written down? Do you start kind of messing with little like kind of previs stuff or anything or drawing stuff out? Or do you just
It's
have them in your head?
mostly it's mostly written down. Sometimes I get
Mhm.
to the part of just like gathering reference,
Mhm.
just because I have such a vivid idea. Like I said, a lot of times I get ideas just from looking at cool art, and so at that point I'll pull all the art references and just have them put down, just so that I can look back and like, oh yeah, I remember what this game was felt like in my head because these are the trigger points for it. But a lot of it is just written down stuff. And then sometimes if I have a very cool like gameplay idea, I'll just do a prototype. Like
Mhm.
I'll make sure to take like, oh, I'm gonna take one day and one day only because I need to get back to my game and just make a
Yeah.
prototype. And I feel like if you can't make a prototype in like a weekend, then it's too big. At least for
Mhm.
me, for one person, it's too big of a game.
Mhm.
Yeah, unless I plan to build a team, which like I said, I don't have any plans to do that right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And then for Super Space Club, do you have the release date or window? I know you posted that you're like pretty much done with it, other than probably small things.
Done, yes.
Like
Like the gameplay is done, but
the
I'm
game,
still adding
yeah.
some polishing and
Mhm.
then just other like accessibility stuff, localization. I'm still in that kind of stuff. So it's the game is done. It just needs to be ported and polished and shipped. Um, that being said, I'm announcing a date soon, but I don't have a public date yet. But
Okay.
this year for sure.
Hmm.
I can narrow it down to Q3.
All right. And how much, I guess, how much has it been moved since you started? And did the pandemic change anything or not really since you were working on it on your own,
Pandemic
anyways?
slowed me down a lot.
It slowed you down.
Yeah, just because just mentally
Yeah,
it was hard. It
it's hard.
was between just the pandemic and then the whole Black Lives not
Yeah.
mattering parts of America. And then me having a child, a black boy, it's just like
Hmm.
a lot of it was mentally challenging for me to actually focus. And then this burnout from working this day job. Pandemic didn't help with burnout at all because I used to part of what kept me at Snapchat for so long was the people. Like I used to love
Yeah.
people I worked with and the people I didn't work with, like people on different teams. But then in the pandemic, you were just working on Zoom, and other than meetings, you never really spoke to anybody. Like you lost the cooler talk, you lost the let's go out for a drink after, or let's go get lunch or coffee or whatever. You lost all of that.
Yeah.
And so it felt like I was always working all the time and it burnt me out. And then I feel like 2021, I barely got any work done because I just felt so burnt out. That's when I left Snapchat. And I was burnt out on everything, like even working on the game. So the pandemic, I feel like, set me back a lot.
Yeah.
But it also helped me to make a lot of connections. And I wouldn't have met anybody from ID at Xbox. I don't think I would have anyway. But I met them because everyone was online. Everyone was on Twitter. People saw the game and reached out. I reached out to other people, and like it just worked.
Yeah.
It had pros and cons essentially.
That's what helped me. Like I got to go to the digital E3 and stuff like that.
Exactly, like stuff like that. Yeah.
And interviewing people because of that. Because before people would have been like, "Oh, well, I'm not in Miami." Back in the day,
no plans to go to Miami right now. Do you plan to come to Seattle? Like, no, I don't.
And now everyone's like, "Oh, we could just do it like this. It's easy."
And it's like it become a norm now, so no one's going to expect, like, it's not a one-off, Yeah, so I think that's also why it's taking me so long to finish, just because I started it in a different time. So the next game I can fully plan properly based on me not having a full-time job and this whole working from home lifestyle and just post-pandemic life.
Yeah,
and that's pretty exciting to me.
Well, I'm excited for the launch of the game and to play it fully.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you to try all the different combinations. There are like, I always do the math and forget it, but there are like over 100 different combinations just based on the 5 characters weapons and chips.
Thanks so much for doing this. It was really great to meet you and talk to you finally.
Yeah, same. Finally, yeah.
Yeah, we've just been a crazy time, but
it feels like we've been talking for like 2 years now.
Yeah, but it's also the game. I thought it was coming out sooner, so it works out now.
It was supposed to be coming out sooner. Yeah, that's why. The moon and stars are just the stars. Why don't we run away? Run away, run away, oh. Why don't we run away? Run away, oh. Take my hand and let's fly away into the night sky. They must sit and now watch as we fly by. Flanking on the whip. I wanna know if you would follow me.
Oh, and I read, because today I posted a thing about my 6-year journey with Breath of the Wild, and then yesterday I was looking at your website and then I checked out your blog and I saw your write-up about Breath of the Wild, and I was a lot of like, I'm like, let me not read it until I'm done like sending this to post. And I was like, there's a lot of similar stuff in there.
Yeah, no, Breath of the Wild changed my whole outlook on games, I feel. There was that, and then there was did you play Outer Wilds?
I did Outer Worlds the other day, I think.
Worlds, that year was a very confusing game. Yeah. If you haven't, you shouldn't 100% play Outer Wilds. Like, I want to write a whole article about it too, but I just never got around to it. But games like that are so fascinating to me. Like, it's all about exploration and just trying to figure things out on your own without any map telling you what to do, like all the little icons on a map, like none of that stuff. It's just you just exploring. I think that's what, if I could make a game like that without it taking up 10 years, I'd figure that's one of my goals, to figure out something like that gives you that sense of exploration.
If you would follow me there. Sometimes I wanna run away. I feel take time on away. I lick a place where we can hide. I lick a space to ease my mind. Cause sometimes I wanna run away. I feel take time on away. To ease my mind. Run away, let's fly away.